Welcome to the Reviews Without Remorse podcast with Joe and Dave. Be warned, the discussions in this podcast will contain detailed spoilers. For spoiler-free reviews of newly released films, please check out our channel Reviews Without Remorse on YouTube and VidMe. Enter at your own risk and enjoy the show.
Welcome to Shrek's Department Store, where we obsess over power plants. My name is David. I may be a sicko, but at least I'm committed. And the man who knows that a kiss is even deadlier if you mean it, Joe.
What's up?
This is episode 78, and in this show, we will discuss... It's a cornucopia of Disney stories today, folks. Today, we're going to talk about the James Gunn situation and confirmation that all in-progress Fox movies will still be released. Yes, that means X-Men, Dark Phoenix, and New Mutants. Star Trek Discovery has announced it has cast its Spock, and it's not Zachary Quinto. Where is he? Who is he? Or as Drax would ask, why is he? And then, light up your bat-filled Christmas tree, folks, as Joe and I head back to Gotham City to discuss Batman Returns. How are you, sir?
I am terrific. Thank you, my friend. How are you doing?
Good, good. Very good, as a matter of fact.
You're immortal. How?
You said it yourself, bitch. We're the Guardians of the Galaxy.
Okay, so 2 bits of Disney news to talk about. Let's start with the big one, and then we'll move on to the other one. Now, the big one is that there have been talks, a lot of talks, about Disney potentially reinstating James Gunn as director of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. This is kind of unprecedented in the world of you did something wrong, you're fired. I don't think, if this were to happen, I don't think something like this has ever happened before.
I don't think so either, honestly. I am pretty, surprised is not the right word, but I am pretty amazed at the groundswell of support and commitment behind the support. I mean, particularly our friend Drax, he really went to the mat and said, I'm not doing another one. And he's apparently stood by it. And a lot of people have really rallied behind him. So, yeah, it is a pretty impressive swelling of support.
I'm quite impressed. I mean, what was it? Literally an hour after she was fired, Sarah Gilbert was like, oh, well, that's too bad with Roseanne.
Yeah. Right,
and, yeah. What an amazing difference. I don't know exactly how this is going to play out, but here's kind of my take on the whole situation. When James Gunn was fired, Disney made the announcement, James Gunn released his statement, and that was the end of it. And, well, we thought it was the end of it. It just kept going and going and going and going. And one of the things I noticed, and I mentioned it to you, and this was one of the reasons why we decided to talk about it here, was the one thing I noticed is there was never a statement from Marvel itself. Kevin Feige has been, almost screamingly deafening in his silence throughout this entire thing. And it's Feige who's guiding the ship here. And we could talk about Kathleen Kennedy and what she's been doing to Star Wars and stuff like that. That's her steering her ship in her direction. But you would be hard-pressed to say that the success of the Marvel movies, it's never, they always say it's never just one person that is the success of a project. And that is mostly true, but in the case of the MCU, you can honestly put it at the feet of Kevin Feige safely and say, yes,
Agreed.
This is the reason why it's working. The fact that he hasn't said anything is pretty amazing. Now, you have to figure Feige has a tremendous amount of clout with Disney. In fact, in all the time that he has been involved in the MCU, he has made, as far as I know, one major power play. And that was when he got Ike Perlmutter and his group kicked off of the rest of the Marvel Cinematic Universe and put them out into their own thing.
Yeah, this is a funny one. First of all, I think I had mentioned to you during the week that there were a lot of examples of where Marvel was very happy to recast characters, and I got a little nervous that Dave Bautista might, he might feel pretty good standing his ground, but they might show him the door pretty quickly and have no problem recasting. But you know what? I do sort of agree with you that the groundswell is too much in James Gunn's camp. So as much as on one hand, I wouldn't put it past Disney to say, well, if you feel that way, goodbye, and we will recast you. On the other hand, it really does seem like it's enough of a storm of support that Disney can't ignore it either. And yeah, you were absolutely correct about Kevin Feige, and he, like you said, he kept very quiet. And now it seems like he is now coming out in support of James Gunn and trying to throw his weight behind him. So yeah, I tell you what, I honestly at this stage of the game wouldn't be surprised either way. If they stand their ground and do not bring him back, I won't be shocked. If they do, I will also not be shocked. I will say this, personally, I do hope they bring him back. I completely understand both sides of this argument. But on a personal level, I do hope they bring him back. And it's funny, I know very well, like I don't like to go down the road of politics. And I'm positive you don't either. Mm-hmm. And, and I try to keep it very sparing. But, I tell you, in this day and age, between Kathleen, the Force's female Kennedy, between, James Gunn was more than happy to get into the mud, which started this ball rolling. It's hard not to address it because, again, this Hollywood today, they can't, Hollywood might as well be Washington. They fancy themselves as just so politically minded, and everyone's got an opinion, and they have to jam it in everywhere. So, again, I hope the lesson that is taken from this, again, James Gunn was more than happy to jump in the mud when it was somebody else. And then when somebody turned around and said, well, what about this guy? What about this guy and the things he has said? Then suddenly it's a whole different story. So, again, I'd like to see James Gunn back. I don't think it was fair that he got fired. I don't think it was fair that Roseanne got fired. So maybe people will walk away and say, how about we just leave that stuff alone? Leave it to the political people, and we will just be, we'll make our movies and be creative and make art, because that's what we're here for.
Yeah, good luck with that. That's never going to happen. Not on either side. Roseanne will never shut up about her adoration of President Trump, and James Gunn will never shut up about his lack of adoration of President Trump. So that's the world we have to live in. But here's my feeling about it.
Yeah.
My feeling is, if you're going to put yourself out there, you have to accept the consequences of those actions.
That's a point too. You're absolutely correct. Again, like I said, I don't want to see the guy get fired, but if you're, like you said, maybe you're right. Maybe they gotta just be willing to stand by what you say then.
Sometimes they gotta burn their hand. Sometimes they gotta burn their hand, and maybe this will teach them a lesson.
There you go. If it's good for the goose, it's good for the gander. So there you go. And yeah, you're right. Maybe they gotta burn their hands to learn. There's a reason why you slap a child on the hand when he reaches for an iron, and don't sit there and have a conversation with him about why you shouldn't do that. I don't know. Like I said, that's the frustration for people on different sides of the aisle. Is that you have to understand this. What happened to James Gunn happens to people on the other side of the aisle all the time. It really does. There is such a storm of people trying to get people fired, trying to get people to lose their jobs, to have people spit in other people's food. It's really getting, like you said, it's one thing to let them have their opinions and let them express their opinions about whether or not they like the sitting president. Fair enough. Completely fair enough. But again, these people take it to such an extreme. This one said this, let's get them fired because I don't agree with their political opinions. This is where it leads. So like I said, I'm hoping people will look at this and say, why don't we just stop playing that game? We don't have to play in the mud. We don't have to get dirty and try to get people fired just because we do not like them or their opinions. Let people just have their opinions and still be able to show up for work on Monday.
I guess it depends upon how extreme the opinion is. If it's one thing to say you do or don't like the president, it's one thing. It's another thing if you say that we should kill all this and all that. You know, kill all liberals, kill all Republicans. When you start going that way, yeah, you deserve to get your hands slapped a little bit harder than that.
Fair enough. Like I said, if it gets crazy, whatever. But again, like I said, people are entitled to political opinions, and this witch hunt, this constant back and forth. And again, look, I'm not trying to say it's one side and not the other. I mean, there are individuals on both sides, but again, this what happened to James Gunn is rare, and frankly, the reason why you're seeing the upswell is because you can tell where most people's political leanings are. They're going to go to bat for James Gunn and not for Roseanne, like you mentioned before. Roseanne gets fired, and her co-star, who is obviously on the left, can't wait to throw her under the bus. As opposed to James Gunn, who, again, said things that no one can defend, admittedly. I think everyone admits that. Everyone has already admitted that. No one is defending what he says, but they still rally and say, well, that was a long time ago, and he already apologized, yada, yada, yada. Fair enough. But again, it still got said. And this is Disney, by the way. I mean, Disney's whole the foundation of this giant entity that is Disney is children. So, of course, they're not going to take that very lightly. Like I said, I mean, and look, and there's also examples back and forth. I mean, I've heard people say, well, look at Robert Downey. This guy was a drug addict. He was in jail. They gave him another chance. Other people have gotten their lives together after going down wrong roads. All fair. All very fair. And then we could play that game all day about, well, what about this and what about that one? Like I said, my point is just stay out of the mud, guys.
Woof. You don't talk to me like that! You little piece of shit! Get the up! Get the up! Now, do we have a problem?
No, sir. No, Mr. Mouse. No, Mr. Mouse.
Continuing with the Disney bash, we are at a point now, as we know, the merger has been signed, sealed, and delivered. And there was a lot of talk for a little while there that perhaps with the moving off of the New Mutants, X-Force, and Dark Phoenix flicks, that perhaps now that Disney owned Fox, those movies were just going to sit on a shelf and forever disappear. Not the case. It has been confirmed that any film that has been completed or is still in production at the time of the acquisition, all of them will still be completed and be released after the takeover by Disney. Now, let's put the asterisk on this one. Because projects that were not greenlit, but being talked about or worked on or anything like that, those ones, they're probably not going to come back. For example, there was talk of another Planet of the Apes movie. We don't know what's going to happen with that now. That seems to be a little bit outside of Disney's wheelhouse. Great flicks. Don't get me wrong. I loved the new Planet of the Apes trilogy that happened, but a tad darker and bleaker than maybe Disney would like to go, although Infinity War could probably, change that ideal. Aliens. They were trying to bring back the Aliens movies. And we see where that has gone. And what of X-Force? X-Force has not gotten the green light as of yet. Are we seeing the end of Deadpool? We still don't know.
Yeah, it's funny. I was really wondering what was going to happen with this, and I'm kind of glad that they're going to let them go, only because, I would kind of not feel right if the fruits of the labors of the people involved did not see the light of day. I'm speaking more towards Phoenix than I am New Mutants, because New Mutants pretty much looks like Marvel's answer to Titans, frankly. So I can't exactly say I'm excited about that one. But anyway, I do think it's fair to let them play out. They've been completed, so let them be released. I would assume that any plans they have for the X-Men to bring them into the MCU at this point is probably not going to happen too soon. So you're probably not exactly slowing up the works by letting them put out Dark Phoenix. So again, like I said, I'm sort of happy to see them at least get that out and finished, but I am excited to see where they're going to go. As far as the other projects, a lot of those projects, honestly, we're struggling. Either like with the case of Planet of the Apes, it seemed to me that trilogy came to a conclusion.
I agree.
There was still room I mean, again, they can go right up until they blow up the Statue of Liberty, frankly, and then some. So I would not have minded another one of those, and they're doing just fine. And hopefully they'll, if they want to, do it. As far as Aliens go and these other franchises, again, you're talking about franchises that have really been run into the ground already. And again, this last Alien Covenant was pretty god-awful.
Pretty god-awful.
Shockingly so. I mean, again, I had hopes after, even though I didn't think Prometheus was exactly a work of art, I kind of liked where they were headed and what they were trying to do. So I was kind of interested to see where they would take it. And then they kind of gave us that horror splatter, summer camp splatter movie with an alien in it. So yeah, listen, they all of those could probably use a little course correct anyway. So, like I said, I'm happy to see the last two Marvels come out. But otherwise, come on, let's let Kevin Feige have at it.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. I tell you what, I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if, since they're doing reshoots, if there's a scene at the end of Dark Phoenix of like them crossing over into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. That wouldn't surprise me at this point. I think it's asking a lot, but I'm just saying it wouldn't surprise me.
That would shock me. It would very much surprise me, because if they do that, what they're saying is this cast and this direction is going to get segued right into the existing movies without giving them a chance to recast, to retool, to re-envision, and I do not see them segueing into the MCU at all.
That's a good point. It didn't actually occur to me. And that also reminds me, James Cameron is filming like Avatar right now.
Yeah,
and that is a Fox movie.
That is interesting. I know. That to me is a wildly strange prospect anyway. The idea that James Cameron is going to take this film that he did several years, isn't it like 5 years at least or something now?
Dude, longer, 10. 2009.
Yeah, right.
2009, 2008.
This was crazy long ago. And now he's just going to say, oh, I'm going to bang out a series of like 5 movies. And it's like, really? I kind of feel like this was Cameron's idea of just sort of banging himself out a franchise where there wasn't one, just like everyone else is doing, like taking a one-off and trying to bleed it for as many films as they can. That was a weird idea to me, because again, I can't imagine a 5-part story happening in that world. You did your story, fine. The evil corporation came in and boo-hoo. All right. Dances with Smurfs was fine, but make it a 5 or 6 movie long nah, I don't see. I mean, going longer than like even the Lord of the Rings movies or any of that stuff, I'm not seeing it.
I'm not 100% sure how I feel about that either, and I'm curious how Disney would even handle a James Cameron. How does one handle a James Cameron?
James Cameron doesn't do what James Cameron does for James Cameron. James Cameron does what James Cameron does because James Cameron is James Cameron.
That's a good point. I can't imagine Disney having any problem with anything he's doing, frankly. Because, I mean, honestly, Avatar struck me very much as a very typical Disney movie, frankly. So I don't really see them butting heads if he just sort of keeps doing what he's already doing.
Oh, I guess not. I mean, he probably has an ironclad contract that no matter what, he still has final cuts, so I don't think they really have a lot to say on it. This is James Cameron we're talking about.
Yeah, and again, he's hardly doing anything dark enough that would cross over into... I mean, seriously, I feel like that Avatar movie, the reason why I liked it just fine, but, Cameron screenplays have a very, very... I just sort of feel like they're very... there's a word I'm looking for. I want to say cliche, but there's a better word than that. But it's like just the very typical hero, crossing this, and the very typical villains and stuff. I mean, he's got the most mustache twisting villains ever. Totally.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it's like from miles away, these guys are telegraphed. So it's like, the stories never really impressed me, but the delivery impresses me. So, again, I don't see Disney having any problems with what he's doing. Avatar struck me as being a very Disney-ish movie.
Yep. Actually, I think they have an Avatar theme thing at one of their parks now.
I wouldn't doubt it.
space, the final frontier. These are the continuing voyages of the Starship Enterprise. Her ongoing mission: to explore strange new worlds, to seek out new life forms and new civilizations, to boldly go where no man has gone before.
And speaking of franchises, well, Star Trek Discovery has cast a new Spock. The third Spock in so many years. His name is Ethan Peck. He has not done a lot. He was in The Sorcerer's Apprentice. He was in a TV version of 10 Things I Hate About You. Side note, I never realized there was a TV version of 10 Things I Hate About You. The Heath Ledger movie. In Time, which I thought was a pretty decent movie, actually, but not a great movie. And he's done some voiceover work, and that's about it. And, you know, he kind of looks like a better-looking Leonard Nimoy, if that's a thing.
I'd say he's reasonably close. I didn't really think he was that close, but then again, Leonard Nimoy has he's got a very distinct look. I think of anybody who I've ever seen who I've said, oh, it looks kind of like Leonard Nimoy.
Zachary Quinto looked like Leonard Nimoy.
I don't even think he looks that much like him. He's got kind of he's got more the demeanor than the actual physical look, if that makes any sense. It's almost like his expressiveness fits for him. So I will give him that. Yeah, am I looking forward to this? Good God, no. Did you? There was an article that came out, by the way, where the creators of this series had talked about the new Spock, and they basically said, "Oh, he's going to be exactly like the Spock that you've always known, except really, really different." And I was like, "Okay, don't know what that means." Sounds that there's Hollywood doublespeak for you. I wish I had the exact quote, but it was ridiculous.
The statement from Alex Kurtzman was, the great Leonard Nimoy and the brilliant Zachary Quinto brought incomparable humanity to a character forever torn between logic and emotion. We searched for months for an actor who would, like them, bring his own interpretation to the role. An actor who would, like them, effortlessly embody Spock's greatest qualities beyond obvious logic, empathy, intuition, compassion, confusion, and yearning. Ethan Peck walked into the room inhabiting all of these qualities, aware of his daunting responsibility to Leonard, Zach, and the fans, and ready to confront the challenge in the service of protecting and expanding on Spock's legacy. In that spirit, we're thrilled to welcome him to the family.
Yeah. I would love more than anything else for somebody to, send me a note saying, hey, forget that whole first season, because this whole second season is much, much better, and you got to give the show another shot. I would love that, because, I would love a good incarnation of Star Trek. But that first season was just so god-awful. And the thing that makes me sort of laugh is that, they invested so much into this new lead character. The Michael, I forget the last name.
Michael Burnham.
The Michael Burnham character. That a lot of people said this was almost like a superhero origin story, the way they pumped her up. And now season 2 comes along, and they bring in Pike. They bring in the original number 1, who was played by Majel Barrett in the original series, the original pilot. Right. And they're bringing in Spock. So they're bringing in so much now to overshadow her that it makes me say, how is this? Like, they don't seem to have a lot of faith in this character anymore. So what am I supposed to get from that? It just seems like they're taking they're trying desperately to appeal to the fans of the original series, and kind of almost saying, forget everything in this first series, and by the way, we're going to throw in some Orville type jokes. So again, the vibe that I get from this is that even they don't have any faith or confidence in what they did in that first season. So with that in mind, that could mean that they're going a wildly different direction, which could be an improvement, or just more desperate flailing around. I'm leaning more towards the second one, but I would love to be pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, I'll let you know, because I'm going to wind up watching it because I'm an idiot.
Because you're a glutton for punishment.
been down here too long. It's time for me to ascend.
From the sewers of Gotham, a new villain emerges.
You didn't invite me, so I crashed!
From the rooftops of Gotham, the perfect enemy comes to life.
I am Catwoman. Hear me roar. Yeah.
When a corrupt businessman and the grotesque Penguin plot to take control of Gotham City, only Batman can stop them, while the Catwoman has her own agenda. Written by Daniel Waters, story by Daniel Waters and Sam Hamm, based on the DC characters created by Bill Finger and Bob Kane, directed by Tim Burton, Batman Returns.
I'm curious to see where we go with this one, because honestly, again, I know we both really enjoyed the first one, and this one, I would certainly call it a solid follow-up, with leanings in different directions. So I'm kind of curious to see where we fall on this one.
The way I look at it is this. The first Batman is kind of like somebody sat down and talked to Tim Burton about what Batman was, and Tim Burton went like, yeah, okay, let's try this. This one kind of feels like Tim Burton said, you know what, I watched some of the old Batman TV series, let me put my own little spin on it, and this is his spin on Batman. As a Batman movie, as a translation of Batman and the characters, it's terrible. As a movie in this particular series of movies, this is actually my favorite.
I'm not totally surprised that you would say that, because it does. First of all, the production value I noticed right away is a step up. Mm-hmm. They do a lot more in this one that they didn't do in the last one. The characters I find are pretty fascinating. Again, I praised the first one for its for the performances, for its casting. And I think the casting here was equally spot on. I think...
very much so.
I mean, this is funny. It was almost at a time when... And I suppose we still do it today. But I can certainly remember, when they were doing the Batmans, it's like, wow, who would be a perfect Joker? Who would be a perfect Penguin? Who would be a perfect Riddler? And at the time, I think, Danny DeVito as the Penguin was probably another one of those that were... It was a given. Like yeah. Who else would you get to do the Penguin? It's got to be Danny DeVito. I think they took him in a wild direction, which not exactly what I would have done, but hey.
But it's what Tim Burton would have done.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I mean, it's funny. The way they make him just so over the top, disgusting and grotesque is like, wow. I mean, even in the first couple frames, he's talking... And for some reason, he's like spitting this kind of black ink out of his mouth. It's drooling down his mouth. And I'm like, what is that? What is that and why? But it was like just anything to make him really gross.
I think, honestly, what that was the makeup that they put on his teeth to make his teeth blacken. And I think he was just spitting a lot. Because it wasn't in all the scenes that it was coming out of his mouth.
Yeah,
just
right.
Some of the scenes.
Yeah, it wasn't a consistent thing. You're right. It was once in a while you'd see it, and it's like, what the heck? And I guess it was just so gross looking they just left it in.
Yeah, why not? It definitely, like I said, from a Batman perspective, it's terrible. It completely ruins the characters, and yet in its own little universe that it created in the first movie, it kind of works. And yeah. I kind of liked it.
Right, and you're hitting it on the head. It with respect to the first one, this one works pretty well. Yeah, I mean, put it this way. I think Keaton's performance... I almost thought that, like, Keaton's performance, for example, he is not quite as Howard Hughes in this one as he was. He kind of does seem more like a normal guy. I mean,
right.
He's very confident as Bruce Wayne. I love the scenes where it's him... across the table with Max Dent or Max Schreck. You know, I mean, those scenes were all really good. The scenes with him and Alfred are very good. And again, he's not as cryptic as he was. In fact, I love the line when Alfred is talking to him about, oh, we need better security because of this and the other thing. He goes, security? Who's the guy who brought Vicky Vale down to the Batcave? I turn around and it's like, oh, hey, Vic, how's it going? I mean, like, that was pretty funny.
There was actually, for a dark story, there was actually a lot of humor in a lot of directions, and it was good quipping. It was, quipping that fit in with the context of each. I mean, it's a terrible. Think of this line. It's a terrible line. Eat floor, high fiber.
Gotta hurry.
Oh, thank you.
It was set up to look like I did this.
No sweat. I'll just tell the police I was kidnapped by an ugly bird man with fish breath.
Somebody say fish? I haven't been fed all day.
Eat floor. High fiber.
and I'm like, it's like, it's dumb. It's like, credit the actors for like selling that so well. Not to mention, okay, here's one thing, and I'm gonna have to compare a little bit to The Dark Knight Rises, which we're gonna compare at some point down the line. Okay, you watch the chemistry between Keaton and Pfeiffer versus the chemistry between Christian Bale and Jesus, what the hell is her name?
Oh,
Anne Hathaway.
Thank you.
Okay, you look at the chemistry. These two, like, whether they were Batman and Catwoman or as Selina and Bruce, the chemistry between the two of them was insane.
Agreed. I really thought, and again, one of the things that I criticized about the first one was the odd relationship with Batman and Vicky Vale. That just seemed very awkward and forced. Here, they gave you a lot more, and it seemed much more organic here.
Very, very much so. I liked the interaction. I've come to find out since that the two of them dated at one point.
In real life?
In real life.
Okay.
So maybe that kind of sort of explains it, but whatever the case may be, it just worked really, really well. Yeah. Credit the actors, credit the whatever the situation may be.
Agreed.
I bought the relationship. I was rooting for the relationship in this one as opposed to the Vicky Vale one.
Yeah, I do too, and I think it worked great. But I also have to preface, though, I think the relationship between Bruce Wayne and Selina Kyle works. The Catwoman Batman thing I thought was a little weird, meaning I didn't understand why all of a sudden Catwoman shows up on the scene and has to start fighting Batman. I didn't catch any reason for that or any explanation as to why that was. Because again, I mean, Selina Kyle was rescued by Batman in the beginning. I don't see why she had any problem with him.
I guess the best way to say it is kind of sort of the feminist Catwoman. What does she say? The first time she attacks the guy, she slashes the guy's face, and the girl says thank you, and Selina grabs her by the throat, and it's like, you're always looking for your hero, for the big Batman and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I think this was her kind of making her mark and being able to say, no, I don't need a Batman. And you're following me now? Okay, then I'm going to have... Because she blew up Shrek's, and then she climbed up and away, and Penguin used one of his umbrellas, and he flew away. Batman started following her.
Yeah.
So that's when she was like, oh, you're coming after me? And that's when she started kicking the hell out of him. So the beginning part of that I didn't have a problem with, because she didn't target him, he targeted her, and her way was like, oh, you coming after me? Okay, let's have at it.
Yeah, and that I guess that makes sense. You're right. It did sort of. I guess that makes as much sense as any. I mean, how many superhero movies where, we kind of never understand why the villain's like, oh, I hate that superhero, I'm gonna get him. There's always like a very cockeyed, way of sort of making that work. Yeah, and you're right. That's as fine as any, I guess. She is on a mission to take down Shrek, blowing up the store is the starter, so Batman's gonna stop her. Makes sense. Okay, I got it.
Then we have the motivations of the Penguin. Now hear me out for a second here, because the movie opens with I kind of like the montage. I thought it was a really well done montage with Pee Wee Herman playing the father.
I love that, by the way. Yeah.
Oswald. Yeah, Oswald Cobblepot. He actually wound up reprising that part on Gotham. Did you know that?
Oh, yes, I did actually. Yeah, you're right. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, he was, and dude. If you're not watching that show, you need to watch that show.
I watched it religiously for a while, and then I got distracted, and I haven't had a chance to get back to it. But yeah, no, it's an excellent show.
You got to catch up to it. It is really good. But that aside, so he's born. There's the crowing. It's like he's just born, looking like a penguin for reasons that they don't really ever explain. And the billionaire parents just kind of moses him into the lake, down to having like the wicker pram and stuff like that that they throw him in.
Very true. Yeah.
It's actually interesting. It's interestingly biblical. His wrath. He's thrown away. He's raised by a completely other family. He takes on their personality. He comes back for the firstborns of Gotham. Very biblical.
Okay, I like that.
So I see where they were trying to go with it, and I guess can get the motivation. And actually, one of the things I liked about the Penguin, not only Danny DeVito's excellent performance and that that is some really awesome prosthetics on his nose, don't you think?
Agreed. Yeah, the makeup job is very good.
That's some Stan Winston stuff right there, I believe.
I mean, it is uncomfortable to look at. It's that good. Yeah.
And he just reveled in it, didn't he? I think he actually ate a raw fish in that one scene where Shrek takes him downstairs for the for the election.
Oh boy. I mean, he as far as being just hideous and gross, yes, it very much works. It again, very Tim Burton, more Tim Burton than actual Batman. Yeah, but we are leading into one of my first issues with this film. The plot of trying to, it's almost like they had two different ideas in mind and they just sort of mushed them together. But the idea that Shrek wants to make the Penguin a mayoral candidate is baffling to me. I don't understand the point of that. You found this guy who is basically like the worst sideshow freak you ever saw, and you say to yourself, that's the guy I want to run for mayor. And I can put a positive spin on that face and make him, I mean, it was, and even as they tried to sort of play this out, they do this thing, they do the thing where somebody runs out, kidnaps the baby, just long enough to go down into the hole, and then he rises up holding the baby as if he rescued it. First of all, how anybody fell for that, I have no idea. But why that alone would make him suddenly you hear people running around going, wow, he's like the penguin who turned into a prince. He's wonderful. Really? Really? Somebody's looking at him going, wow, that's our guy. We like him. That to me is like right up there with the Emperor showing up with his mangled face at the end of Revenge of the Sith, saying, I'm the guy who's gonna fix everything. The Jedi are all bad. You should listen to me, even though I look like a hideous monster.
I am pretty sure that is just Tim Burton's way of slamming politicians and how somebody is elected not for who they actually are or whatever. I don't know. I'm not 100% sure where they were trying to go with that.
That's a good point. And yeah, that is kind of Burton-esque. Again, we talked last time about how he loves doing like the ugliness behind the perfect facade.
Right.
But again, that's some serious ugliness, and the idea that you're going to try to put lipstick on that turd is just a little far-fetched. Again, I mean, seriously. He had...
No. Gotham City is progressive, dude. Gotham City is the most progressive city in the planet. That's got to be what it is.
Possibly. But again, it's... Max Schreck had a son. And by the way, I love how the son kind of tried to play it with that Christopher Walken accent. He didn't say much, but the little he did, he tried to do that. Okay, father, I will do this for you, or whatever, like that kind of, so I thought that was pretty good. But anyway, but seriously, Max Schreck has a son. He could have just groomed him to run for mayor. Like, why would you get this guy literally out of the sewer who looks, again, like a hideous half monster looking thing? He might. We don't even know if the Penguin can write his own name, but I want him to run the town, run the city. Like I said, it's just you have to just sort of sign on for that and say okay, and then run with the rest of the plot.
Well, yeah, because on that note, the other thing you have to accept is that a nebbish, nerdy executive assistant can suddenly go toe-to-toe with Batman when groups of professionally trained martial artists get their butt kicked by him. So
yeah, that right, and that's a lot of the point where I mean all of these Tim Burtons. I mean you can't accuse them of taking themselves seriously. So it's not like you can turn around and say, wait a minute, this doesn't make any sense. Well, none of it makes sense. But again, you're right. Like, how far are you going to sort of forgive before you start to say, well, okay, but give me something. Like, again, he shoves Selena Kyle out at least a 4-story window, lands flat on her back, and
after going through a couple of awnings,
right.
Don't forget,
doing the Temple of Doom out the window through the awnings. Right. Okay. Fair enough. I mean, it wasn't like I was shocked that she wasn't dead, but then the cats all come out, and I almost wondered if they were trying to subtly do, like, I almost think the awful Halle Berry Catwoman, didn't they sort of have like some origin? I didn't actually sit through it, but wasn't the origin sort of like where the cat kind of breathes a spell into her or something or other? It was almost like I was wondering if they were kind of doing that here without actually committing to it.
I don't know, since I got to be honest with you, I never watched the Catwoman movie because you could smell shit from a mile away, dude.
Right. Yeah. I feel like that I've seen movies where like the cat will come up on somebody when they're sleeping and they'll they suck the breath out of them. It's like an old myth. And I think you're thinking of the movie Cat's Eye.
I
probably am, yeah. And
yeah.
But I feel like I've seen that kind of, again, sort of, it's almost like an old myth of this. So I thought they were trying to sort of imply without really going all the way with it that the cats are there. And there was one cat that almost was like right in her mouth, Yeah,
that was Miss Kitty.
So I'm saying to myself, like, are they trying to imply that that's the origin, where there's like something a little supernatural happening with the cats here? Because otherwise, like you said, you just have a nebbish little lady who was thrown out of a window, and instead of going to the hospital and recovering, she becomes a supervillain, and can do cartwheels and backflips, and she's on building rooftops and all kinds of things, and it's like, okay. But but why? Well, so again, like, movie, give me something. I mean, give me something to tell me that this is why this person has the abilities that she has.
It doesn't really it's not really about that, I don't think.
Agreed.
It's hard. It's weird that I'm the one kind of semi defending this movie, because normally from a Batman perspective, I would be right with you, but I kind of feel like the first movie set the tone.
Agreed.
And this movie continues that tone and does leave a lot to it's a comic book, so, fill in the blank yourself. We need to get from point A to point B. Honestly, probably what this movie suffers from is something that the remaining series suffers tremendously from, and that's the case of trying to introduce two villains.
Yes, right. It's got the we can't replace Jack Nicholson dilemma, so we have to bring in two villains. I completely agree with you. Yeah.
I think they could have easily just stuck with either Penguin or Catwoman. I don't think that would have been such a terrible movie if they had stuck with one or the other. But honestly, for what it's... And Tim Burton loves his villains a hell of a lot more than his heroes, doesn't he?
Yes, he does. And it's funny because... this is probably something I will repeat when we get around to the Batman Begins era. But, one of the things that Roger Ebert used to always say is that I don't understand these Batman movies because you have a character who is very interesting in Batman, but he plays second fiddle to the villains, which they seem to have this love affair with.
And it's a trend that continues, actually, even in the Schumacher era, which we are unfortunately going to get to.
Right. Yeah, you're right. I mean, and I feel like it's it's almost like they took a page from the original series, where every week, I mean, in the original Adam West series, I think in the beginning they were casting villains who, seemed to fit the part. At some point, they just brought in celebrity after celebrity and would create a villain and say, "Here's the villain of the week." And
Vincent Price as Egghead.
You're right. I mean, there was tons of them. So yeah, I kind of feel like that's what they're doing here. They would trot out the celebrities to play the villains, and that's who we sort of have the fun with. And it's funny too, but because I think there's good and bad in it. What I think works in this respect, it works because I never feel like either of the villains get shortchanged. I feel like they do spend an adequate amount of time on each villain to give you their full storyline, their full motivation. I'm not saying I believe the motivation. I'm not saying it's good, but they do put the work in to sort of flesh it out the best they can and say, here's what this villain is all about. And they give you a lot to chew on. The downside is that the film becomes really bloated. This film definitely tried to be bigger and better than the first, and on many levels it succeeds. On the other hand, at about, when I'm into this, to the 2/3 of the film, I'm starting to finally look at my watch and say, okay, this is really going, like, this is over 2 hours. So yeah, it's a little bloated, it's a little heavy, and by the time you're getting to the end, trying to get everything wrapped up, it's just a lot to sort of put together. So again, it does kind of get all over the place and just feel very heavy.
It does, but I kind of feel like it balances it relatively well, considering. I don't think it really falls off the wagon at any point. Well, 2 points, but we'll get to that. I felt like it stayed true to the way it started. It started with a certain tone, and then it continued with that. Here's how you know what the tone of the movie was. 5 seconds after the Red Triangle Circus Gang attacks, Commissioner Gordon says, "What are you waiting for? The signal." The signal goes up, and all around Wayne Manor are these little bat lights that kind of like just parabolic arc, all the way to get into Batman. That sets the tone right there. It's like, guys, please don't take this too serious.
Exactly, yeah. And by the way, in keeping with that, right, the physics of it doesn't quite work, but the shot is tremendous. The shot of the bat signal coming in the window, him standing up with the big bat signal lit up behind him, is a tremendous shot. So yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, it is the sense of style, the sense of fun, over the sense of reality.
Yeah, and I really do enjoy it. I kind of feel like I'm apologizing for it, because being the Batman fan, I suppose I should hate this, because it is totally not the Selina Kyle from the comic books. It's completely not the Oswald Cobblepot from the comics. And yet, I still find it compelling.
Yeah.
I still found it wonderful. I found Michelle Pfeiffer's performance, the way she kind of slipped between Selina and Catwoman, I thought was tremendous.
I completely agree with you. And honestly, I mean, I really feel like Michelle Pfeiffer deserves credit for doing 3 roles, frankly. Because I feel like she's doing the Selina Kyle before, the Selina Kyle after she gets thrown out the window, and Catwoman. So I mean, honestly, she really, it's almost like she's got like a third part there.
Yeah, it's kind of, I know what you're talking about. When she's with Bruce, she's like a hybrid of Catwoman and Selina.
Yes.
She's in that like middle area between the two of them. She even has a line at one point in the movie where she says, he makes me feel like the woman I think I want to be.
Yeah.
Which the dialogue in this was really, really sharp.
Agreed.
In that respect, with getting the characters across and the way that the actors portrayed the parts. Honestly, this movie works so well because of the relationship with Bruce and Selina. I feel like the Danny DeVito character, as great as Danny DeVito was, and as fun as that character was, he was a distraction. I was more focused on the stuff between Bruce and Selina.
I completely agree. And listen, by the way, in no way, shape, or form, I don't even want to sound like I'm bagging on this film, because I'm not. I really do. I agree wholeheartedly that it really did stay consistent with what the first one did and fleshed it out even more and took it in different directions. So listen, everything from the technical parts, the sets and everything that are more fleshed out than Maybe not as much, but just different and goes in a different direction, expands a little bit more, and the performances are all terrific. So again, it's not that I want to pick on it, and you should not apologize for enjoying it as much as the first one, if not more. So I mean, it's a very, very good film. But like I said, my only real problem, my problems are sort of twofold. The Penguin and his storyline, it's just kind of odd, and it really does expect you to take a leap of faith in a lot of ways to run with it. The Catwoman, I agree with you, I find much more fascinating and works very well. And again, it because they're trying to jam so much into this film, they're trying to do bigger and better. It just gets a little bloated and weighed down.
A little bit. I don't think as bad as that. In subsequent viewings, I feel like movie flows well. I kind of agree with you what you're saying. It is a bit bloated, but I feel like it found a good balance. This movie finds the balance that the subsequent movies, which we'll get to, could not.
Yeah.
There is, it easily could have fallen over on itself, and surprisingly, it didn't. Or at least I feel like it didn't fall in on itself.
Agreed.
I felt it stayed, relatively well. Was it too much? Yeah, I agree that they were probably trying to do too much, and it's just a tiny miracle that it didn't implode the way it could have.
Agreed. And again, I mean, if we're gonna say, like, does it fail? Because no, I'm not saying it fails. I am saying that it is one of the few aspects of this film that pulls it down a little bit. Here's an example. There's a scene on the rooftop after they had just fought Batman, and I guess where he kind of went running back to the Batcave because they one-upped him, and the Penguin says something like, okay, so how about you and me with a bottle of champagne go back to my place? She goes, ugh, I'd rather, whatever. And he just goes, you minx, you sent out all the signals or whatever. And I kind of felt like that was jarring. And it was almost like now they need to cut some time out and move to the next stage where now Penguin and Catwoman fight. And it was an odd moment, and I felt like they were trying to play catch up at that point. Like I said, I mean, you look at, you do the best you can with what you got, and Batman has a lot of characters. There's a lot to put in these films. So I'm not saying it's a huge detriment, but again, there was moments where I was feeling it.
I'm a woman.
Sorry.
But, unfortunately, I feel like we could have talked more about this movie, sir, but we are at that time. I hate to say it. I hate to be the Debbie Downer of this, but yep, it's that point. It is time to give this movie a score, and what you're going to hear, folks, is my opinion once again that of this era of Batman movies, this series of Batman movies, this is my favorite. I gave it a 9. I enjoyed it.
Wow.
Enjoyed it a lot. A lot more than, in fact, even rewatching it, I was like, wow, I can't believe how much I'm enjoying this. It's not perfect, not by any stretch of the imagination, but I also happen to be a fan of Danny Elfman and Tim Burton during that era of filmmaking.
Yeah.
That was like, they were like my two favorite combinations for the day.
Yeah.
And this is like the pinnacle of them at their power. I feel like the opening music that they used for the Birth of the Penguin is probably one of Danny Elfman's finest compositions. That whole, with the violins and everything like that. I love the symbolism in the opening montage. He's in the cage. There's a little duck hanging off there, and he grabs the cat and pulls it inside and stuff like that. Just like the subtle little things like that. I enjoyed the look of the movie. I like the symbolism, how he was thrown into the river at the beginning, and then at the end, when they finally turn against him and he's running away, he jumps off the same damn bridge into the river again. I loved that. I felt that there was a lot of great symmetry in this flick. It's not perfect, but I enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I was going to enjoy it, even with my years later and thinking about how I've had what I consider to be the perfect Batman movie in Batman Begins, which we'll get to, for this era, for this selection of movies, from Batman to all the way to Batman and Robin, this is my favorite. It gets a 9.
Wow, I'm mildly surprised. I mean, I can hear that you like it, but I wasn't sure you were going to go up to the 9. Listen, like I said, again, do not apologize for your score, because I hear everything you're saying, and I completely agree with you that, like you said, this film really does work on a lot of levels. And again, it does take what happened in the first one and steps it up a notch. So yeah, I do not want to criticize that at all. I will, but again, like I said, I will sort of say that I just did feel mildly overwhelmed by, again, a lot of different storylines, a lot of things crossing over and trying to sort of tie it all up at the end. I did sort of feel like it got, just a little heavy and a little too long. Just a little trim here and there might have even done it. But again, I'm not even sure where that trimming would happen. So yeah, I all worked out pretty. I mean, we'll put it this way: maybe they could have taken 5 minutes out of watching her sew her suit together. That could, I did like that scene kind of went a little long, and there was a couple things that I guess took a little while. But anyway, I'm gonna stick with my 8 because again, I do feel it is a solid entry, and like I said, and even for the things I'm sort of criticizing it for, I do feel like, I mean, the production value went up. The performances stayed stellar. They fleshed out the Bruce Wayne character a little bit more. So again, the things that were working in the first one that kept right on going. We didn't talk much about Christopher Walken's performance. I thought he looked great.
He was solid.
Totally solid. He looked like he fit right into this world with everybody else.
His little sort of semi Donald Trump of the 90s look.
There you go. Yeah, I was wondering. He looked to me like he was wearing a prosthetic forehead. I couldn't tell if he was or wasn't.
It's hard to say. With Burton, he might have been.
Yeah. So again, I do think this film works, and I think your comparison to Batman Begins is interesting because you know what we always say about the Star Treks, that some work as classical music while others work as rock and roll. I think this
is rock and roll,
right? This is sort of the same idea. I think Batman Begins works as classical music. This one works as 80s pop music, sort of.
Or early 90s, or maybe I would say more like early 90s ska.
Yeah, I mean, I almost feel like this is sort of like the somewhere between the 80s pop music and like the goth stuff that the kids with the black eyeliner was listening to. So again, I mean, this film is really a feast. It's a good feast on the eyes, on the ears. I mean, one of the things that we regretted that we didn't mention last week was the score. So I'm glad you brought it up this time because again, the score spot on by Danny Elfman. I think this soundtrack has got to be his best work that I can think of. I mean, he always brings it. He's always excellent. But yeah, here he really does hit sort of a peak, I think. So again, the relationship with Selena Kyle works much better. Everything really worked great. So again, it's much more ambitious, almost to a fault. But again, it really does. It's a treat and it's fun to watch. And again, there's a lot of the films that we're going back to. That's kind of like, oh, I gotta watch that one. Oh, well, it's okay, whatever. But again, I watched these and I enjoyed every minute of it. So I'm really happy
so far. I am happy we got back to it too as well. Yeah. But Joe, who asked you?
Who asked me? I probably will just sort of go and I almost hate to pick on this, but I'm gonna go with the Penguin character and just say that I felt like they really, like I said, they really went overboard with this idea. First of all, again, if you're going to make him as foul as you can, where he's literally walking down the steps to meet people, you don't even put clothes on him. He's chewing on a dead fish, and
which they gave him,
right? He walks down to this glowing, adoring group of fans, blonde and beautiful teeth, blue eyes, looking at him like he's the next coming of Jesus. And it's like, again, it's so bizarre that I can't put my finger on what the film is trying to tell me. I mean, again, if you try to polish him up, and clean him up and have him maybe, put the suit on him with the top hat and have him walking downstairs looking elegant like the Penguin, where we fall for it for a little bit. And then later, the gloves come off and he throws it all off and he's all disgusting. We're kind of like what they did, but they didn't do the polish part. So again, like I said, I kind of feel like there was something they were going for, but it was almost like they couldn't decide which direction to go. Do we want to make him gross and disgusting, or do we want to make him somebody that people will like and fall for a little while, so that when he is exposed, you see the downfall. Like I said, I don't know. They were having too much fun with him as just being kind of gross and disgusting to sort of see that thing through that they were trying for.
Yeah, probably. I feel that, man. I can definitely feel that. You know what? For me, for Who Asked You, for me?
Tell me.
Where did the black eyeliner go? Where did the black shadow go? Where did the black eyeshadow go?
On Selena Kyle?
No.
On Bruce Wayne?
Yes. The scene at the end when he rips his mask off. He's got black eyes the entire movie to give it kind of just so that you can see his eyes. And then just before he rips his mask off, suddenly that black eyeshadow is gone. And then he rips the mask off. I'm like, oh, come on.
Yeah. Well, I've always been I've always felt the scene with him ripping the cowl off as if it's made of gummy bear was a little strange.
Yeah.
I mean, I get that it would certainly taken the drama away if you had him sort of like oddly trying to pull the thing off over his head or something or other. I get why you sort of had to go there, but yeah, that's a little strange. But yeah, you're right. The eyeliner just you're right. Of course the eyeliner just goes away.
That's a case of where somebody's design was more important than the plot, and that's ridiculous. If they actually redesigned part of the costume to make it easier for Keaton to move, why couldn't they have just made the cowl so that you can take it off easier without having that dramatic rip-off part? And so that you could explain away that he doesn't need the black around his eye or something like that, or anything. It could have been you could have done something better than that. That annoyed the hell out of me, even in the replay.
All right, but I hear you, but again, I mean the thing that we've sort of said all along about these films is that the style overrides the story.
Yeah, that is very true. And for whatever reason, that just got to me this time around. So
that's a perfectly good little irk.
All right. For your consideration, and I get a feeling that you and I might be on the same page on this one.
Yeah, well, there's a couple of things that I feel like I could go with. One of which definitely being the Burton's, the Danny Elfman score, which again we said is tremendous, and I think it's got to be his best work.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I feel like watching it this time around, I couldn't stop watching Michelle Pfeiffer's performance as Selena Kyle and Catwoman, and the Selena Kyle before. Like I said, I really do feel like she was juggling 3 different roles in this film. And yeah, the chemistry with her and Bruce Wayne really did work 10 times better than the Vicky Vale stuff that, again, just felt sort of shoehorned in.
Mm-hmm.
Here, it was very organic. It definitely just sort of grew on its own and was very easy to believe. So, yeah, I really think this was a tremendous part of the film, to the point where, yeah, by the end, when he's saying her, come on, we're 2 of the same, yada, 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 I'm rooting for him. I'm rooting for him to convince her to just give this up and go home. So, yeah, I think that part of the story was probably my favorite, I guess.
Even the small things, like the things that you wouldn't think much of, like where she's coming to towards Shrek at the end.
You killed me. The Penguin killed me. Batman killed me. That's 3 lives down. You got enough in there to finish me off?
One way to find out.
4, 5. Still alive! 6, 7. All good girls go to heaven.
That look on her face when she says, all good girls go to heaven, just before she's like right in his face.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I never thought Michelle Pfeiffer. Here's the weird thing. I always used to think Michelle Pfeiffer, pretty woman, okay actress. It's weird how I remember when I saw this movie, it's like, holy shit, this woman can act.
You know what's funny? I still to this day remember the first time I saw Michelle Pfeiffer in anything, which of course was Grease 2. And I remember back then saying, wow, it's really a shame that this actress did this movie because she seems like she would really have a future if she didn't pick this clunker that's going to obviously drag her down into obscurity. So I am very happy that she survived that film and went on to do much bigger and better things.
Probably the only person to survive that film.
Yeah. And another, by the way, another one who has the who can claim the claim to fame is that they have conquered a DC film and now conquered the DCEU. I mean, excuse me, the MCU.
That is very true. That is very, very true. I as far as I'm concerned, she is still the benchmark for Catwoman. Maybe, yeah, she's still the benchmark for Catwoman in a modern sense to me. And
I tell you, and honestly, I think when I first saw the movie years ago, I kind of didn't get the big deal because I thought the costume was so silly, and I thought, I thought she was fine. But now that I look back, I'm like, wow, she really did do a tremendous job. So yeah, I very, very impressed with her in this film.
I think she's honestly the biggest reason why I give this movie a lot of props. I was very compelled by the story. I was very compelled how she played it. I found the whole symbolism to a woman in the 90s, the bombardment of, hey, wear this perfume and your boss will ask you out for candlelight dinners and stuff like that, and her just and her just total rejection of that. I dug it. I thought it was really well done, and she's just perfect, and that's why she is also my for-year consideration. I was going to put the makeup. I was going to do it was two things. I was going to mention that Danny DeVito's makeup is just amazing. That nose, I was watching that nose so damn closely this time around, and it's just so well blended into his features that it's almost flawless, man.
Yeah.
The costume itself, maybe not so much, but her, no. Michelle Pfeiffer, this was Michelle Pfeiffer's movie, and the fact that they even attempted to do a Catwoman without bringing back Michelle Pfeiffer's Selena Kyle just goes to show you how tone deaf the people at Warner Brothers were at the time with what they had in these movies.
Agreed.
And speaking of tone deaf, ladies and gentlemen, that ends our review of Batman Returns. But wait, same bat time, same bat channel. We watch as the series takes a wobbly step with Val Kilmer taking over the part of Bruce Wayne, bringing in Tommy Lee Jones and Jim Carrey for Batman Forever.
The 2-hour toy commercial. It's funny. I haven't seen this one in so long. I can't even remember now if I've actually even seen it from beginning to end. So I'll be curious to see how I feel about this one.
I'm not looking forward to this. I had to recently rewatch it when Liam got into Batman and Robin. Well, not recently, but a while ago. I had to watch it, and we'll talk more about it next week.
Okay.
Yeah. So you got that to look forward to, ladies and gentlemen. But yes, excellent show once again, my man.
You too. Good one. And like I said, looking forward to next week. Thank you, my friend.
All right. Have a good night, ladies and gentlemen. Good night to you too, sir.
See you next week.
Thanks for listening to the Reviews Without Remorse podcast with Joe and Dave. Join us here every Thursday for a new episode. And be sure to check out the Reviews Without Remorse channel on YouTube and VidMe for spoiler-free reviews of new releases, as well as in-depth discussions of current and classic cinema. If you enjoy this podcast, please consider becoming a patron. You can find our page at patreon.com. As little as $1 a month goes a long way. All clips in this podcast are used for commentary and critique, and is considered fair use. No copyright infringement is intended.
Music on! His name is James Cameron, the bravest pioneer. No budget too steep, no sea too deep. Who's that? It's him, James Cameron.
Systems are normal. You guys hearing the song okay up there?
James Cameron, explorer of the sea.
Yes, James, we hear the song.
Descending to 1,000 feet. I don't see the bar yet. Looks like it must have sunk pretty low.
With a dying thirst to be the first. Could it be? Yeah, it's him, James Cameron.
I'm thirsty.
I'm hungry.
I'm Batman.